Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Gary Gray, Director of Athletics at Stroudsburg University. It's my pleasure to welcome you once again to tonight's webinar entitled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in College Athletics, a Call to Action. Tonight's program is the fourth in a 12-part series that ESU Athletics will host between now and February 2022, with one speaker per month addressing the same topic, each in their own unique and personal way. We know we need to continue to make progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion in college athletics, and we look forward to hearing and discussing the ideas shared by each of our presenters. Also want to remind you that each speaker's presentation is archived on our ESU Athletics website, so you may listen to each of those after the fact. East Stroudsburg University is a diverse university where diversity, equity, and inclusion are highly valued. However, we all recognize much more can be done, not only locally, but also within our state, within our country, and even globally to improve our society in so many ways. We know we can do better. To cause change, action must occur. To cause action, discussions must occur, ideas must be shared, and commitments to change must be made. It is with this idea in mind that we have created the speaker series in athletics. During today's presentation, you're invited to send in questions or comments by way of the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Those will go directly to Mr. Noah Strone, Coordinator of Athletics Operations at ESU. You see Noah on your screen. When our speaker has concluded her remarks, Noah will serve as our moderator by sharing those questions or comments or thoughts or observations you send in with our speaker for her comments or responses. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nancy Jo Greenewald, Professor, Associate Director of Athletics for Student Athlete Success, and Senior Woman Administrator with ESU Athletics, to introduce tonight's speaker. Dr. Greenewald.
Thank you, Dr. Gray, and good evening, everyone. It's really exciting for me to introduce tonight's speaker, Domineque Scott. You know, when I started thinking about what I might say, I thought about how long have I actually known Domineque. And Domineque, I don't know about you, but it's pretty scary because I came up with the number 18 years. And it's like, where did that time go, right? So I'm still trying to process that. But, you know, one of the things that most of you know that I enjoy about my job and is that I love getting to know the student athletes. So my first encounter with Domineque was certainly as a student athlete based on her being part of the field hockey team. But I eventually had an opportunity to get to know her on a more personal level based on her pursuit of a degree in sport management. You know, over the years, Domineque has always been one to keep in touch with me, and I've always appreciated that. And, you know, I've listened as she shared her epiphanies about her life and her career. You know, I've had the opportunity to applaud her willingness to take risks in order to pursue her dreams. And I've also watched her get more comfortable being uncomfortable, which really tested her values and it challenged her resiliency. So for some of you that may be on the call tonight that know Domineque, you know her as well as I do, that her smile and laugh are infectious. They make us all smile. But for those that may be meeting her for the first time tonight, you will soon realize that she's really a very special young woman. She's always been committed to a cause greater than her own. She's a servant leader whose priority is helping others. And in doing so, she is intent on making the world a better place for all of us. So it's for this reason that I'm really glad that Domineque agreed to share her story, or at least a little part of her story, with us tonight, because I know there's so much that we can all learn from her. And based on those lessons, I'm sure we'll all be better individuals because of it. So Domineque, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And thank you, Dr. Greenewald. Wow, 18 years. That's definitely a long time. And I really appreciate that introduction. Very, very powerful. I feel like you did the whole presentation for me. So I'm hoping to inform you all on some other things, but Dr. Greenewald did a really, really good job. Secondly, I want to thank Dr. Gray, and I also want to thank Noah for putting this together. This is a great opportunity. And I do want to say I'm honored to be a Warrior, number one, and I'm honored that the athletic department is taking this initiative to kind of talk about these issues that we are dealing with on a daily basis. So that's very, very powerful. And I hope it sets an example for other universities all over America. So this series, it's wonderful to be number 4 out of 12 on this series. And I also want to thank Coach Miller, who I think is on the call. I do want to thank her for giving me the opportunity to come to East Stroudsburg, to have this opportunity. And I also want to thank Coach Ord. At the time, she wasn't Coach Ord, she was actually my teammate. So I got the opportunity of playing with her on the field hockey team. So I really, really appreciate this opportunity. And I hope that I'm able to share some knowledge with you. And like Dr. Greenwald said, I'm all about giving back because of what sport has given me. I'm all about giving back all over the world. So I'm just going to kind of highlight different parts of my life throughout this presentation. And I hope that number one, it gives you a different aspect of DEI. And I hope it, and hopefully it will definitely convince you to make a change through your life and through other people's lives. So I'm going to share my screen now. All right. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see the presentation? Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to kind of go through my presentation, and feel free to ask questions, and I will address them at the end. But you will hear me refer to DEI because that is something that it's kind of a buzzword right now, and I think it's very important. And I'm so honored to get the opportunity to talk to you all about DEI. And what I really wanted to kind of focus on, the vision that I'm going to do throughout my presentation is going to be talking about the importance of DEI within the world of sports, and also the importance and the impact that it had on my life personally. So that's kind of the adventure that we're going to kind of go through when you take a look at my presentation. So first off, I really wanted to kind of give you a background of who I am and kind of why I have so much passion for what I do. So this top picture really highlights a lot of who I am. This top picture here, this is me, this is my baptism. And I was very young. This was in Baltimore. So I do want to just kind of touch on this, is the people that are holding me are my godparents. They're Indian. This is my father, he's Black. This is my mother, and these are my adopted parents. I was adopted at 6 months. So this is my adopted father, he's Black. My adopted mother, she's white. And then this is my brother, and he's mixed. So know from the beginning that I've always been around culture. One other thing to kind of point out is interracial marriage right here. They got married in the 60s. So notice the struggles that they had to deal with, which was very much a struggle. And also notice the struggles that probably my mom had to deal with because I'm Black, my mom is white, my dad is Black, lighter, has a little bit of Indian in him, so very light, and my brother's a mix. So even when we were normally going through life, it was always a very much challenge because we felt like we always had to over-explain ourselves when people wanted to know, tell me a little bit more about your family. So that was very challenging. That was very challenging for me. But the pros about that was I got the opportunity of seeing both different cultures, and being able to be around the Indian culture and eating the Indian food, being around the Black culture, being around the white culture. That was amazing to me. So talk about diversity. I got it from as soon as I was adopted at 6 months, I got all the diversity that I needed. And it allowed me to open my eyes to the world. So I was born in Baltimore. I moved to Delaware right now. I live in Millsboro, Delaware right now, but I grew up in Milton, very close to Lewis, Delaware, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. That's where I've spent most of my life. However, I've had a lot of opportunities to kind of go outside the state and do a lot of different things with my life. So I got the opportunity to attend East Stroudsburg University, thanks Coach Miller. She recruited me to play field hockey, and I got my undergrad and grad degree in sport management, and Coach Miller liked me enough to allow me to come back and be a grad assistant, which kind of helped me narrow down my focus in sport management. There's a lot of different avenues that you can go in sport management. But at the time, I respected Coach Miller enough as a coach, and then also respected her enough to coach next to her, which was a great opportunity. So I was kind of going the athletic coaching route at that time. So that was amazing to see. After graduating from East Stroudsburg, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I worked at a school called Madeira School. And at the time, it was in McLean, Virginia. And at the time, it was, and it still is, a very prestigious school. At that time, when I was coaching, the Attorney General's daughter went there. And that was also within the conference. That was also the conference that a lot of the presidents and the senators and the representatives and everybody that kind of worked on Capitol Hill, their kids was in that district. So Sidwell Friends is the school that most presidents and vice presidents, if they have kids that are that age, that's the school that they're going to send kids to. So that was the experience that I was coming from. A lot of times I wasn't really communicating with the coaches. I was communicating with their assistants, which was very interesting at the time. So kind of a culture shock there, but the kids were very grounded and very focused on education. And also very focused on their sport. So that was a great opportunity. I got to coach varsity field hockey there. I also worked at Edmund Burke. It was in Washington, D.C. And I actually coached basketball there, and I was a substitute teacher. So at the time that I was living in DC, I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go within sport, and I wanted to see what level I wanted to go. So that's why I was kind of coaching at the high school level at both of those schools. And at the time, I was interning for an organization called Sports Challenge, which was kind of also helping out underserved kids. So after I worked at both of those schools, I applied for a grant. And the grant was called, is NCAA Ethnic Minority and Women's Grant. And there was a cohort of us that received this grant, about 13 of us. And we were placed all over America at different institutions, higher education institutions. There was also another person that went to East Stroudsburg. His name is Malcolm Huggins. He was a part of the track and field team. He was in the cohort of the year before me. So he got the opportunity of doing this as well. But during this cohort, you got to have kind of a two-part role. So I was the assistant to the athletic director, and I helped out with budgeting. And I also helped out with compliance. That was my number one. That was my number one role, was compliance. And I also was assistant field hockey coach at the time. So we were in the Empire 8 at the time. That was the conference that Washington and Jefferson were in. Washington and Jefferson is located about 30 miles south of Pittsburgh. After that opportunity, I got a chance to move. I stayed within the Washingtons, and I moved to Washington and Lee. So as you can see to the picture to the right, I'm pictured with Coach Miller, and we are recruiting at ESPN. So I'm wearing my Washington and Lee shirt. She's wearing her ESPN shirt, and we got a chance to kind of run into each other doing a recruiting event. So that was down in Disney. So we got the opportunity of doing that. So at the time that I was at Washington and Lee, I coached, I was a physical educator, and I coached squash, which now has become one of my favorite sports, along with pickleball. Couple of sports that I really, really enjoy. And I also was assistant field hockey coach there. So I have kind of been in and out of coaching, and really, really have been enjoying myself through different levels of coaching. One thing that I did want to add was when I was also at East Stroudsburg University, Coach Miller it never was an opportunity that that she always made me feel welcome on the team. There never was an opportunity for me to feel like I wasn't ever comfortable. So I did feel very, very, very comfortable through the team. And one of the things that really stood out to me was I was a part of a student ambassador group. And at the time, it was a grouping of different people on campus, and upperclassmen were grouped with lowerclassmen of minorities that were coming onto campus. And we talked about different things. And a lot of the different things we talked about is, as a minority, how can I fit in at East Stroudsburg University? So maybe a question will come up is, where can I get my hair done? Or where can I get these certain types of food that maybe is more cultural food? Where can I do different things that are related to culture? Because there were a lot of kids that were coming from, let's say, Philadelphia, that were coming to East Stroudsburg. It's a little bit of a change of the environment. So that was definitely one of the highlights that I had when I was at East Stroudsburg. So after W&L, I always had an yearning of giving back and helping people, kind of the greater good. So at this point, I also wanted to play abroad. I wanted to play field hockey abroad. So through a lot of research and through a lot of different things, I came upon an organization called United Through Sport. And I'll talk about that in the next slide, but it landed me in South Africa. So some of the things about South Africa, which was powerful, is number one, this was the first time that I was out of the country. And that was kind of a little bit of intimidating. So I flew from Dulles Airport in Virginia, and I flew to Frankfurt, Germany. And at the time, the way I booked my flight, I had an 11-hour layover. So what I thought was, let's go into town. As soon as I hit the train to go into Frankfurt, I couldn't understand anything. I didn't know what I was really going into. And the only thing that I knew that I could associate with was McDonald's. So guilty enough, I ate lunch and dinner at McDonald's during my 11-hour layover. And then I flew down to Johannesburg, and then I flew to Port Elizabeth. So on this map here, I just want to point out, this is where I was in Port Elizabeth in South Africa. And at the time, I landed in South Africa, January 2014. And before I landed there, the country had changed a little bit. And the reason why the country has changed, because Nelson Mandela just passed away in December 2013. I arrived January 2014. So within weeks, one of the most prominent figures in South Africa had passed away. So you can imagine kind of the climate and the culture of South Africa at the time that I landed there. So that was very, very powerful. Another thing that's very powerful is when I was in South Africa, when I landed in South Africa, I was 27 years old. And if you know of any history of Nelson Mandela, he spent 27 years in jail fighting for justice, fighting a nonviolent fight. So that's very powerful and something for me to reflect on. As soon as I got there, I was reflecting on that I got the opportunity of being in South Africa, and the entire time that I was alive at that point, he was sitting in a jail cell, and he was a political prisoner that was a nonviolent political prisoner. So that was very, very, very powerful to me there. And I knew as soon as I got there, I knew I needed to make a difference in so many people's lives when I was there. And it was because we were all living in the wonderful shadows of Nelson Mandela, and we needed to do the right thing. So another thing that I really want to point out about this picture is this map right here. And what's powerful about this map is that they actually call South Africa the Rainbow Nation. And it's because of everything that's on this map. Number one, they speak 11 different languages in South Africa. And there's a lot of different races and cultures. So notice the bulk is white men and white women. And then the next bulk is going to be African men, African women. And then you also have Indian men and women. You have colored men and women, and you also have foreign men and women. So there are a lot of people. So foreign would be a lot of people from Germany, a lot of people from Holland, and a lot of people from Asian countries are in this country. Also colored, something that when I got there, I kind of were a little bit nervous to even say, because we haven't said colored in a long time in America. But when I learned a little bit more about the culture, colored is a combination of Black and white, what we associate as mixed. But colored means they speak a different language as Afrikaans. So basically, they speak the same and similar language as Dutch, just a little bit different. So a colored person, for what the visual appearance of them would be, is what we would associate as mixed. So those are there. As you can see, there was a melting pot of people that were in South Africa. When I worked there, the staff was South African, but people were coming from all different countries. So I originally went over there to volunteer, which then turned into a job. So you had people coming from England, you had people coming from Brazil, you had people coming from Switzerland, Ireland, a lot of different, Australia, a lot of different countries, and you can imagine a lot of different cultures and a lot of different language barriers. So we were just a melting pot of goodness, of diversity and culture, and it was just an amazing thing to be around 24/7. So it was just amazing opportunity. And in terms of timeline, I was originally supposed to be over there for 6 months, and I ended up staying for 2 years. And I volunteered for the first 3 months, and then it turned into a job. I ran the volunteer program, and the volunteer program was about 200 volunteers a year that kind of came in, which was a wonderful, amazing opportunity. So I really enjoyed myself in South Africa. And lastly, this quote that I really want to touch on, because it kind of touches in on the DEI. It really touches in, because Nelson Mandela really had the concept that sports is going to change the world. And what he did, and what was probably one of the biggest powerful statements that he did, was when he got out of jail, when he became president in 1995, he approached the Springboks, which was the rugby team, which was a movie that was featured, which is called Invictus. And at the time, Morgan Freeman played him. And at the time, he said, in order for us to bring the country together, the Springboks need to win the World Cup. And they actually said, okay, we're gonna do that. And they won the World Cup in 1995. And at the time, before he got out, a lot of the people in South Africa supported the All Blacks, which is the team from New Zealand. And the reason why they didn't support South Africa, because like I said, Rainbow Nation was not representative of the roster in terms of the look of the roster. So a lot of people steered away and really focused on the Springboks. And when they focused on the Springboks, they were only thinking at the time that that in order for us to win, we need to support these guys. But what Nelson Mandela said, in order for us to push forward, we really have to make sure that we unite the country. And that's what they did. Winning the World Cup really united the country. So United Through Sport is the organization that I worked for. Here's the mission right here. And basically, we worked in disadvantaged communities. We worked in the Nelson Mandela townships. We coached about 15 schools a week. There is not physical education on the national curriculum. So outside of that, they didn't really have physical activity. So we taught these following sports. Notice that some of these sports are not American sports, but I got the opportunity of learning a lot of them. And especially outside of America, soccer is called football. So a lot of times that was one of the most popular sports there. Rugby is another sport, and also cricket is another sport that's very, very popular. So at the time I worked for United Through Sport. I volunteered first and I worked for United Through Sport, and I also played for a South African club. And what I noticed is that I finally found out that field hockey is actually a men's sport. So every time we went to club practice, it was mostly men on the field and a couple of sprinkled women in. So seeing the game at that level was amazing. It took my my life, and it took my game of field hockey to another level, which was very exciting. But what I wanted to kind of point out in terms of pictures up here, these are children, and their race would be considered Black. Notice that there's males and females playing. Notice that they're wearing uniforms. So even at public schools, the kids wore uniforms to physical education class. So that was something really exciting for them to see. However, I'm sure they would like to be in other clothes so they can kind of run around, but respectful of the culture, respectful of the people, they wore that. This picture down here, these are colored kids. Notice that the clothes are a little bit different. Notice that they can kind of wear it a little bit different than what the Black kids were, because the financial level is a little bit higher in the culture of colored kids. So this is kind of a picture of us coaching. And also these are a picture of some of the volunteers that kind of coach some of the kids. So it's really been it really was an opportunity for coaches to come over, bring their coaching expertise and really coach all of the kids in all of the different townships. So right here, I really want to touch on some of the inequalities in sport, especially at the college level and at the youth sports college level. So kind of the bread and butter of me is that I really want to push youth sport farther, and I want to give kids more opportunity. So on the left side here, I kind of put a little bit of statistics to kind of tie in, why DEI is so important and why we really need to make sure that we're doing the right things to give kids the opportunity. So this is some of the statistics. So 2.5% of college field hockey players are Black. 15% are other ethnicities. A lot of times they're coming from different countries and they're coming from different cultures. But for me, that number is very shocking. I could go through a whole conference and play different teams in the conference. I'm sure it's much different now, but I might not ever see another Black player. Luckily at East Stroudsburg, there was another Black player that came in my sophomore year, but I might not ever see that. So that is a number that's definitely very, very shocking. I'm a part of an organization called the Black Field Hockey Network. And specifically our goal is to raise visibility of Black and brown people and different ethnicities in the sport of field hockey. Because it is big in different countries, especially South Africa and India and Argentina. It's huge in those different countries. So that is the goal. But those statistics were very alarming. And that's why it's inequalities in sport. Another thing that I really wanted to touch on is some of the inequalities when it comes to youth sport and really getting ready to start playing is the top 5 sports that are the most expensive. And it's mostly expensive based on the equipment and gear that are needed. So these are the top 5 sports. Notice that field hockey is in this list. Because of in each one of these sports, you have normally your helmet, your stick, your shin guards, your mouth guards. In terms of diversity, football is probably the best. But notice in these different sports, you're not seeing as much diversity as you would see in basketball, because all you can do is just pick up a ball and just keep playing. Football, there's more diversity there, but notice in these other sports, there's not a lot of diversity. It's definitely improving, but there's not a lot of diversity. And that's something that we have to get better at. And we definitely have to support them in different ways and kind of giving them different support, in terms of maybe sponsoring a kid to kind of go to camp, or sponsoring equipment, or sponsoring them to go to a showcase, different examples of that. So this little image is something that I'm sure a lot of you've seen. And this is the one that stood out to me, but I've seen this image in different versions. But I really wanted to touch on the differences of equality and equity. So equality, notice on the left-hand side, it's sameness. Everybody has the same level box. But notice that the little kid that's all the way on the right cannot see the game. And that's actually a cricket match going on. They can't really see the cricket match. So it only works if everybody starts from the same place. And notice that everybody in this example has to be at the same height. Versus equity, that in order for us to meet the differences and the barriers, we all have to have the same access. So if it takes a couple more, in this example, if it takes a couple more boxes, that's what we have to do in order for us to be on the same playing field. So in order for us to ensure equity, in order for us to have equity, we need to have equality. So they need to meet in the middle. We have to understand that. So this kind of leads on to what I'm doing today. And one of the quotes that really stood out to me based off of this organization called RAND Corporation. And what they focus on, they're a research and analysis situation, and they really focus on the impact of security, health, education, growth, and development in order to make things better overall. So this statistic really is the reason why I'm driving youth sport and really helping out with youth sport. So lower income parents are less likely than higher income counterparts to involve their children in youth sport because of the obstacles such as rising costs of extracurricular activities. So I talked about equipment in the last slide, talked about, so another thing is travel fee, also uniforms, knowing that uniforms change every year, also knowing about the fees that kids have to pay in order to go into a tournament, also lodging, also transportation. Everybody doesn't have the opportunity to do all of that. So that is my passion, and this quote kind of drives who I am every single day. And how can we make it so it's more equitable? What can we do to make a difference in order for every kid to get the same opportunity? So this leads to now what I am doing. When I first came back from South Africa, I had a nonprofit which was called United Through Sport USA. So I was just a branch off of the South African nonprofit. Now I'm kind of focusing in on specifically in Delaware, in the pockets of poverty where there's lack of opportunity, lack of resources, and a lack of access to sport. So what I'm trying to do is relaunch my nonprofit, very similar, working in a disadvantaged community, bringing in life skills and education. But the new nonprofit that I'm going to launch is going to be called Sports Moves. So kind of in a way of how sports is moving you through life. And what the focus is really running in line in parallel with the club system, because a lot of times, a lot of kids can't afford the club system because of all the expenses that I named. So I really want to give kids the opportunity of playing at the high level of club, at the same time having mentorship, kind of dealing with nutrition and dealing with mental health, and dealing with overall health, and giving them good coaching. So that's overall my goal, what I want to do, what I really want to make a change in this world, and specifically in Delaware. And I'm hoping that it will spread outside of Delaware, but really giving kids the chance of giving them a helping hand and really telling them that you can play sport. You don't have to stop sport because of a financial barrier. We really want to do something, raise enough money to kind of push you forward so that then doesn't become a barrier. So my last slide is kind of, where are we with DEI? What do we want to do in order to push athletic departments all over, coaches all over? What can we do as warriors to make a difference in our world? And what I think, what my advice is that especially coaches and anybody that's in the athletic department, in order to create an environment of inclusion, always give the same level of respect for anyone. Doesn't matter their race, color, gender, sexual orientation. Give them physical, mental disability. It doesn't really matter. Give them the same opportunity. Never tolerate derogatory, belittling language between athletes. Listen and display empathy to all athletes. That is my advice moving forward. And I'm sure that I might be speaking to the choir here because everybody believes that. But if we can do one thing, if we can just share this knowledge with other people and just continuing pushing people further and making sure that we have the correct DEI in the world, I think we're going to be able to create a better world, especially through athletics, and also outside of athletics. We're going to really make a change in our world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Domineque. If you want to leave that last slide up there for a moment.
Oh, sure. Yes.
You know, I heard you say, you know, we probably all know that, But you know what? And you're probably right. But the ability of people to practice that consistently every day without fail and sincerely, I think we have a ways to go before this just becomes standard. You know what I mean? So across the country at all levels, there's so much work to be done, and you're probably right. I think we all do know that these three, but I'm really glad you put them up there, because like, just look at number 2, not tolerating derogatory, belittling language. Think of how much we see that, and how nice that would be if that didn't exist consistently. You know what I mean? Just like it never happened. People just, it's not their vocabulary. It's not how we treat people and how we relate. So it really reminds me of the fact that there's a long way to go in consistency and sincerity, and just following through and being good examples to teach others so that they want to model that. So I'll just start things off, if I may, with a couple of questions, but thanks for that. Thanks for all those slides. Those were outstanding. You really addressed the topic well. Thank you. We really appreciate that. I'm only going to ask 2. I could ask a bunch, but I just want to look at 2 pieces. Back to your first slide, and where you began by talking about growing up in an interracial family. Did your parents talk with you as a child about the interracial family, either generally or specifically? And if so, kind of at what age were you aware of that? And what were those discussions? What's your memory of those discussions, of being part of that, of the family as you described it and pictured it?
Absolutely. I can definitely answer that distinctly. It happened in middle school. I had no idea that I was different until I was finishing up with basketball practice, and I was waiting for my mom to pick me up. And my mom pulled up and she yelled, Domineque, time to go. And there was a kid that was waiting for his parents as well. And I don't remember who it is to this day, but he leaned over to me and he said, who's picking you up? And I said, that's my mom. And he said, there's no way that that's your mom, because she's not the same color as you. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, yes, she's my mom. Like, that's who I live with. And that was the light bulb that went off. And you can imagine our ride home. You can imagine the conversation that we had. And that was, it was definitely a struggle in the beginning of just trying to understand, but also noticing that, the fact that I was adopted, and I always say it was my second chance in life. I was born in inner city Baltimore, and we know how inner city Baltimore is today. So that was my second chance in life. So that was really that was really something that the light bulb went off. And when he questioned me, I was like, well, what do you mean? And that's really where the conversations went. But my parents did a good job of just always putting us around different cultures and always seeing differences and really loving the differences and really embracing all the differences.
Good answer. Before Noah takes over here with several that have come in, just in your 2 years in South Africa, was there a lesson or more than one that was helpful to you, something you learned living in that culture, as you described it, with the rainbow, et cetera, that helped you when you came back to America permanently? Like, in that 2 years, was there something related to race, or I mean the whether it was how those races blended, or what was the South Africa lesson, I guess, in a nutshell?
So
I don't know if I'm saying that right.
No worries. What was interesting is the apartheid only ended in the 90s.
Yes.
So that is interesting, because you still feel that in terms of where people live. This was the Black community, this was the white community, this was the colored community. And even at the same time, it was kind of mixed throughout the day, but at night, you kind of went back to your area. So that was also very interesting. Also, something else that was interesting is in South Africa, they kind of have an invisible hierarchy. So when I showed the rainbow nations and the different races, it would start at the top with the white man, the white woman, the colored man, colored woman, Black man, Black woman.
Hmm.
So as you can tell, I have a lot of energy, and sometimes I can come off as abrasive because I'm very passionate about so many different things.
Sure.
So in order for us to set up different sports programs in different schools, I had to talk to a lot of principals. And a lot of times I wasn't really respected because of that hierarchy. Because I was very much like, okay, we're going to bring in volunteers. We're going to coach at this school. This is what we're going to do. This is our delivery. And a lot of times, a lot of people were taken back by me because I was talking to someone and they took it off as like I was very directive, but that's kind of the way they would say it's the American style. That's how you guys act in America. Yeah. So that was very, very shocking to me. Another lesson that I had was we worked at a physical disability school. So we did a lot of wheelchair tennis. That was life-changing for me, just seeing kids in wheelchairs and really, really, really enjoying themselves and not letting their disability hold them back. That was amazing. And another opportunity was at that same school, there was a deaf component. So I know here we have Gallaudet, which is located in Washington, D.C. But coaching at a deaf school makes you a better coach overall because you had to learn the sign. You had to learn to really explain your lesson to kids that couldn't hear you. So that changed my whole perspective, and it made me a better coach moving forward because of, if you can coach kids that can hear, if you can do kids that are nonverbal, then you can really be the best coach that you can be. And giving everybody that opportunity through inclusive sports is amazing.
Good. Well, thank you. You can take your slide down if you want, and then our pictures will pop up a little bit and a little bigger. And Noah, why don't you get through some of those great questions?
Well, you've answered almost all the questions just in terms of your presentation. It's been fantastic. So thank you, Dominique. We do have a bunch of great questions, and obviously a lot of them seem to be about your experience in South Africa. So we'll get to those in a second. We'll diverge from that for a second and talk about one of the first questions. Actually comes from maybe a current or former player, but we'll leave that alone for a moment. But what is the best advice you would say you got from your coach, Coach Miller, when you were here as a student athlete?
The best advice that I got, when I got to East Stroudsburg, I had a lot of family issues, had a lot of adversity coming in. So mentally, it was very hard for me to be away from home, because I had a death in the family right before arriving. My dad passed away in March. I got to East Stroudsburg in August for preseason. So that was very much challenging for me. And actually, Coach Miller got the opportunity of meeting my dad. He came on a lot of recruiting trips. So she just allowed me to kind of have a space to mourn when I need to. But at the same time, she pushed me to kind of be there and play and perform well in academics and on the field. But at the same time, she understood what I was going through. So kind of the advice that she gave me is just, you have to keep on. You got to keep going on. But at the same time, understanding what I was going through. And she always reassured me if something was happening, she reassured me that everything was going to be okay. Just keep playing hard, just keep playing, because this is something that you love. And this is something that you're going to continue to have passion about. So she was always very good example of that she kind of gave me my space to talk. But at the time she knew when to push me. She knew when to make me work hard and make me kind of earn my spot on the field. And I really appreciate that.
Awesome. So getting to some of these questions on your time in South Africa, which was amazing to hear about. What was the biggest culture shock that you had when you lived in South Africa?
Well, poverty. Poverty in America is something, but poverty there is something that I've never seen. The way that I describe where they lived, it looked like a kid's art project, where it was just like their houses were just placed together. if you can imagine, if there was a bad rain, everything was just coming through their house. Everything was kind of really out in the open. There were really like no rules in terms of in the township. What was very interesting in the township is the roads were really thin because they never thought that Black people would ever have cars. So when you're driving, there could be a house on the right, house on the left, and everything's very, very, very tight. So that was definitely very interesting. I know we did a township tour as soon as we got there, and we were on just like a 15 passenger van, and we were kind of driving through where we were coaching, and all of a sudden we heard a loud thump, and we looked back, and there was a guy just on the back of our bus, and we talked to the driver, like, what's going on? And he's like, oh no, this is how they get around. He's just going to jump on for a little bit, and then when he wants to get off, he'll just get off. And I was like, okay, like that was just like insane for me. I know for coaching sessions, it wouldn't be rare if a goat just walked through my field hockey session or my tennis session, a cow just walked through. Kids didn't even react. That was big. The kids that played soccer, AKA football, they just wore one cleat on their kicking foot. They would just come, there would be rocks and dirt and everything. And all they had, because they didn't have a lot of resources, they just wore one cleat on their kicking foot. And that's what they did. So their resilience, at the same time, they're South Africa and anywhere in Africa, they're very humble and very happy because they don't really know what else is out there. So it was sad for me to see where they lived and the lack of water and different things like that. And the trash was everywhere, but that's all they know. But they were so happy. So like the thing that we used to do when we were younger, and it's different now, playing in the street, kids will play there all the time because because the families are so close to each other. So everybody's looking out for each other. And especially getting into education and being working in schools here in America, what was different is, you see kids that are not coming to school, they're cutting school there. Kids would walk 3 miles to school just to make it, just to be there. There was a kid in 6th grade. He was 18 years old. He was in 6th grade because his parents did not allow him to go to school. He wanted to finish school. So he was 18 and with 6th graders. And he was there because he really wanted to finish school. So that the passion that they had for education and for sport was definitely something that changed me forever, because they were so poor, but they were so happy, and every single day they got up and they wanted to make a difference. So that was definitely life-changing for me when I was there.
Wow. No, I'm speechless for a second, just trying to think of the rest of the questions to ask, because that answers a couple more, but just the experience. And I had the opportunity myself to actually travel to South Africa and had family friends that lived there, but then ended up, because of some of the things you're talking about, ended up moving to Australia. A lot of people moved out of South Africa and Cape Town area and moved away. So it kind of flows into one of the questions. Another question here was, did you experience exclusive behavior when you first arrived in South Africa? And if so, did that change over time?
Well, I can tell you that politics is insane there. It's definitely insane. There are over 20 parties there, and the party, the ANC, the African National, is what Nelson Mandela, that was his party. So at the time, the president at the time is not the president anymore, but he was frivolously kind of dealing with money in a way that he wasn't really supposed to be dealing with. So a lot of times in terms of protesting, all of that was out in front of you. That was really much out in front of you. They have something that's specific to England. It's called Guy Fawkes. So it's someone that kind of took over Parliament, a guy that took over Parliament in England, and they still celebrate that in South Africa because it's a British colony. So during that time, what they did was they burned trash cans and they threw them. They would throw them out of anger and different things like that. So there would be a lot of times that we would have to cancel our sport programs because then we would hear about gang-related things. So we would have to cancel programs, or anytime around different protests, if there were any speeches on TV or anything like that, we would have to cancel things, because that was definitely a direct threat, especially to a lot of our volunteers, because most of our volunteers were white. And what they said in South Africa, especially in the Black community, they would say Malungu, that was the word. And that meant white person is in town. So you would hear, as you drive through or walk through, you would hear all of a sudden that word would be shouted from different places, and we would have to be vigilant on what they meant. But a lot of times, the white people that were in the Black people's community, they were there for volunteering and helping out, and they were kind of the trade. So helping out with anything carpentry or different things like that, they were helping out. But it was something that we always had to be vigilant of. If there was anything that was going on, we had to be vigilant of. And another thing that really happened is they had something called load shedding. So that means like the electricity would go out for like 2 hours at times. So you kind of had to deal with it. And sometimes you didn't know it was happening. So being able to kind of deal with that from a lot of volunteers that were Western culture, kind of being like, so what do? I don't have Wi-Fi, I can be on my phone, I can't be on this and that. That was very much a shock for people that were there. So I feel like I was changed, because I felt like, well, we can still communicate. We can still communicate if we're not on our phones. That's a good thing. So yeah, hopefully that answered the question. I don't know.
Oh, it did. How do you best bring underserved voices to the table in what you do currently now, obviously getting away from the South Africa piece for a moment, and or any of your previous roles? How do you help those people that have underserved voices?
So what I always say is our goal is to be the voice to the voiceless. So, and the voiceless are those who are in the underserved at-risk community, and being able to allow them to be champions of their own community and listening to them, because they definitely have they know their community the most. So what I can't do is go into an underserved community and be like, all right, we're gonna have this sports program. They're gonna be like, who are you? And what do you think you're doing in our community to change us? So in order to go in, you have to understand their needs and their wants, and you have to allow them that they're powerful, they're leaders within their own community, and we just kind of run parallel. We're partnerships with them. So we just try to put them on a platform of, we have to listen. We have to listen to what they need to do. And we have to tell them, we kind of give them projection on, we understand where you are. This is where we want you to be. And this is the steps that we need to do to kind of get there. So that's what Sports Moves is about, trying to eliminate those barriers of kids being like, I can't play sport because I can't afford a $2,000 playing for a club team, which is similar to field hockey. If you play for indoor and outdoor, it's going to be $2,000. A lot of times in our community, especially in Delaware, sometimes it's seen, if you don't play for club, you're not going to get recruited. And if you just play for high school, you might not have the same opportunities if you play for club. And those opportunities is kind of the pay for play. And everybody can't afford the pay for play. So what can we do to give the kids the same skills and the same direction and the same initiative? So that's kind of my goal of giving them, painting the picture that they need, but meeting them halfway, not trying to go over top of them. I understand where you're coming from, but this is what we need to do to work together. But you still at the same time need to be held accountable and need to work together and work hard.
All right, I think we got time for one or two more questions here, probably one more, and then we'll wrap it up. But you've obviously had so much influence on those that you've had the opportunity, both here in the States and abroad. Have you been able to keep in touch with any of those athletes that you might have touched on or worked with in the past? And if so, how has that impacted them on the future of their lives, either abroad or here?
Yeah, so in South Africa, it's a little bit harder because of the technology barrier. However, when I left, thank God of Facebook, and thank God that I also had the opportunity of still talking to the staff, that they always would send me pictures of kids in their math class or on the rugby field and different things like that. And at times, you know, if they were close to a Wi-Fi unit, I could talk to the kids and stuff like that. But that is the hardest thing for United Through Sport is, you know, you have volunteers coming in for 5 to 8 weeks and then they leave. That's very hard for kids. Change is very, very, very hard for them. So that was the only way that I could live through them vicariously through the volunteers that were there and the volunteer coordinator that were there and also the staff. But really trying to support them as much as they can. Some of the kids are older now, they're in their 20s. So I can talk to them normal. I can talk to them on WhatsApp is a big thing that you use that's kind of technology. So I could talk to them. The kids here, I try to support them because a lot of times in the underserved communities, there are not people that go to their games. There's not kids that go to their chorus concert. They're not kids that they're not parents that support them or any guardians. So I try to show up at these different places because I feel like if you talk to any athlete, a lot of times they're like, well, my parents never came. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it, you know, might be better depending on the type of parent. But when your parent is there, when you can look over to the sideline and have some reassurance, that's really something that's helpful. So, you know, we just try to be present and we try to show up and really say, like, whatever you're doing, we really, really, really support you. And we want to give you guidance and we really want to be a mentor for you.
Well, Dominique, we're out of time, unfortunately. It's been a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. Some amazing points about your background and how you've tied them into culture and sport and diversity, equity, and inclusion. We sincerely appreciate it. And thank you for answering questions and the discussion and addressing some of the comments from our viewers tonight. And as I said, many, many more people will see this from our website archive. So you will continue to impact people with your presentation tonight. Noah and Dr. Greenwald, thank you also, as usual, for being part of tonight's program and doing such a great job. And finally, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, or if you're watching this recorded, either way, to be part of this ESU Athletics speaker series. We hope to see you again next month. We plan to announce the speaker and the date for July very shortly. Thank you, everybody, and good night.